Hello and welcome to Full Disclosure, a podcast project conceived entirely to let me spend more time with interesting people than I would ever get on the radio show. And you're 10 years younger than me, Stephen Frayne, but goodness me, you've crammed a lot into your life, so we'll get through as much of it as we can.
Amazing.
Of course, I should stress at the beginning for people who are going, Stephen who, is that you are the artist formerly known as Dynamo, and we will get later into the reasons as to why you no longer are. But I want to begin in Bradford in 1982 on the Delph Hill estate, where you were born to a single mum, to your mum Nikki. And we often talk on Full Disclosure about how we only have one childhood. We don't have it. We only have the childhood that we lived. We've got no way of knowing at the time whether it was different or ordinary or but you've sort of subsequently realised that life was pretty tough, I think.
Yeah, I think I grew up on a council estate, which is quite a normal thing for a lot of people, actually. More, I guess, the majority, really. And when you're living there, you don't fully realise if you're poor or if you're rich, and because the people in your surroundings are also in similar backgrounds. My dad went to jail when I was young, but it wasn't uncommon for people in my area to also have parents that were locked up or single parent families. And then, we didn't have a lot of money, but neither did the next door neighbours. So when you're just surrounded by that, you don't feel particularly any different things. If anything, you feel the struggle in the parents because you see that they're grafting. Adult life looks really difficult when you're a kid and you kind of want to keep young forever. I think it's only as I've got older and I've been fortunate enough to be able to travel the world and share my magic with people in places I never would have imagined being, that I fully appreciate the struggles my mum had to go through and my family and people in them similar backgrounds.
You didn't have much to do with your dad growing up, I don't think.
Not really. He went to jail. He was in and out even before I was born. And then he went to jail quite early on when I was I was 3 or 4 years old, and I never saw him after that until I was 19. I saw him briefly. He contacted my grandma actually, wanting to meet me, and I met him and kind of didn't really keep in touch that much after that. It was just, I think it's slightly weird because I was already a young adult myself.
Yes.
And I'd kind of gone through so much of my life without someone in my life. So it just felt like really forced, trying to maintain any type of relationship. And then, and also he wasn't necessarily, he hadn't been changed his ways since being inside. And I was just starting to, I just got my Prince's Trust business startup loan. I was starting to kind of, take a good path forwards. And I didn't feel it was like the wisest idea to have him around and everything that comes with him.
And you've always had other family members providing you with the security that all children need, and indeed, as we'll get on to, with the male role model that benefits an awful lot of young lads as well.
It was actually my great grandpa.
So your mum's granddad.
Yes, yeah. So my mum's grandpa. He was like my grandpa because my mum's grandpa and my mum's mum and dad, they didn't live in England. They'd moved to America.
There's a line coming up later in this interview where one of us will say they had 17 award-winning golden retrievers.
Yes, no. So my mum's mum, my Nana Lynn, she moved to America when I was really young, with Martin, my granddad, because Martin, he was working for a British company that got bought out by an American company, and then he got moved to the States to basically run the companies in America. So he ran it in Virginia for many years, and then now he's based in Memphis, Tennessee.
Wow.
And they've been there ever since. They've got green cards and everything. And when my nana moved out there, she started breeding golden retrievers. She loves dogs.
19, not 17.
Well, she had 19 award-winning golden retrievers that was when I was 18. I went out there and stayed with her and did all the dog shows with her and everything, helped her grooming the dogs. And it's such a weird thing when I think about it, right? But she's got more now because they've got litters of puppies. So they've got like 9 champion dogs, and then they've got all the litters that come every few months. So yeah, that's really a thing for my life.
That's incredible. And because your mum was she was 17, I think, when she had you, it wouldn't feel like a great granddad. It would feel more of an age that
it was always just Gramps.
Yeah.
It's always my nana and Gramps, who are actually my great grandparents, but they were the main constant. Like when my mum was obviously young, and then as she got older, she went to college and she's trying to find herself in life. So often my grandparents or my great grandparents would be the ones who would look after me, or my auntie Mel, my mum's sister. But yeah, it was kind of like it must be a strange thing, being a child raising a child. You know what I mean?
Yes.
I think it's very hard to understand what that feels like. It's also when I look at my mum, like my father was Patan, so I'm a mixed race child, and my mum was with him in a time in Bradford when it was not, when it's quite frowned upon, like when there were a lot of the tensions were in the air in Bradford in those times back in 1982. You know what I mean? I'm prior to that, so like in some ways, people have asked me like, where does your determination and your like kind of resilience to put yourself out there come from? And I never used to really know, but I think actually when I think about it, it's from my mum, because she was going against the grain when she was growing up. I know many people told her, obviously I was inside her, so I couldn't quite hear exactly what people were saying, but I know that she told me like people were saying that she should get rid of me before I was even born. It wasn't a good idea to bring me into the world
because you were going to be mixed race.
Because I was mixed race in the world that they lived in. Like we were on quite a white council estate. From the age of up until the age of 15, I was advised by family members, if anyone asks, just say that you're white.
Right. And
that was a normal thing. It was only as I got older and started to kind of just embrace my ethnicity and kind of just, we moved to different council estates where there were more, where it was a good mixture of cultures there, and suddenly I started to feel like I belonged more in those areas, and then fast forward, years later, I met my wife, and ironically, she is a similar mix. She's half Irish and half mixed, but but with her, I've never had to hide it. I've never had to pretend. It's just normal.
This is who you are.
Yeah.
There's something there, though, isn't there? Probably for the amateur psychologist about covering things up or misleading people.
Yeah. But I think as a magician, there's a lot of secrets I've got to keep anyway.
Well,
so
that's
I think,
what I mean.
If I can just let go of everything else, that'll make my life so much easier.
So there was a lot of love growing up then, despite the sort of slightly fractured family background.
Yeah.
There was lots of love. You mentioned your mum's sister, your auntie, your grandpa.
My auntie adored me. I know my auntie struggled for years to have her own child. So like she always said that I was her first in some ways. And yeah, my grandparents, they absolutely adored me. It was definitely like I was quite sheltered, because the areas we lived in, it wasn't the sort of place where you just go out and kick a football around and play football, unless you want to come back without your trainers or whatever. Do you know what I mean?
Yes.
And I'm not even like, I'm not even perpetuating a stereotype there. There's literally documentaries about it. Like there's a documentary which was filmed in literally like my house was in the documentary.
Okay.
I didn't have a parent around to sign a release form, so I wasn't actually in it.
Right.
But there's a documentary called On the Breadline.
Wow.
It was an amazing documentary. You can still find it on YouTube.
Yeah.
And
that is
that literally, like, they were on my next door neighbours, like the
right.
Grants, the Trotters. They were the people that I grew up with, and you kind of really get a feel for what it's like to be a child living in those areas in that time.
Yes.
I don't think people will fully understand it, even to this day, because life's changed so much. But yeah, I've watched that documentary so many times. I actually want to try and track down all the people that were in it now, because a lot of them I knew growing up, and it'd be really interesting to see how they turned out.
It would be, wouldn't it?
So if anybody wants to make that show, hit me up. But yeah, it's. I just think I look back on all these things, and I actually feel like I'm quite lucky because I got to experience so much that has given me a foundation to be able to, in some ways, deal with anything.
I wonder if you had to, because some of the stories you've told, even before we get to school, your 6th birthday party, you said Mum organised it and nobody turned up because other parents at primary school didn't want to bring their kids to the estate where you lived.
Yeah, but I didn't know that was the taboo. I didn't know that was the reason. I'd never had a birthday party before.
Right.
So my mum arranged it. We actually lived in a high-rise flat at the time, similar to like a Grenfell type building. And nobody came to the party. I later, obviously, as I got older and realised that they didn't come because nobody wanted to come to the area that we lived in. My mum had got me. I got a 6-pack of Kinder Surprise eggs, and for me, like I say, I'd never had a birthday party, so I didn't necessarily know what to expect. So when no one turned up, and other than my family members, other than my nan and gramps and my mum and my auntie, like, for me that was a party still. And we spent all afternoon building the little toys that you get with the Kinder Surprise eggs, and it was still, I still look back on it fondly as one of the best birthday parties I've ever had.
When did you realise that, from the outside looking in, it hadn't been? When did you put together the...
When I got older, I went to middle school.
Yeah.
And in middle school, like, you start getting invited to like proper parties, and at middle school we had like, you had like a school disco and stuff like that, and you start to realise that parties are full of lots of people.
Supposed to be some other people
socialising.
Yes.
And I got invited to a few parties then, and I realised then that there wasn't many parties that took place where I lived, but there was lots of, when I go to, like, my best friend, even to this day, my best friend Johnny Farley, he lived in a part of Bradford that was a bit nicer. Okay. And he had lots of parties, and I used to, ironically, I wasn't his friend when I did this, but when I used to go to school early on, I would cut through his back garden, because his garden was next to school, but he had quite a lot of land. Yeah. His dad built all the houses that I lived in, and basically I used to cut through his back garden, and then one day he caught me, but we became friends, and we've been friends ever since. Like, he's literally my oldest friend.
This is secondary school now.
Yeah, secondary school. Yeah, we had primary school, middle school, and then upper school.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What were you like at primary school? What were you like at your lessons and stuff like that?
Primary school was easier than middle school, because I think ultimately there's still that childlike sense of wonder that every child has at school, and I was always kind of excited about the prospect of learning and learning new things. I was curious. I'm even curious now as an adult. I think that's one of the things I've tried to maintain. Like, one of the things I've always tried to do since leaving school is never stop learning. Like, every single day I try to learn something new, because I think when you often stop school, you get out of a habit of learning in that way.
Yeah, of course.
So like, I've always tried to maintain it. So like in primary school, I was a kid, and I think that's I was a kid that I was meant to be. I tried everything. I failed at everything, but I didn't care because I enjoyed the process. Middle school was more difficult, because middle school, we're going obviously through adolescence. Big documentary as well, by the way. Everyone's talking about that. But
have you seen it?
I haven't watched it yet. My wife watched it without me. Can you believe it?
No, I can't. That's outrageous.
No, so I've got to watch it on my own.
I watched it last night.
But yeah, obviously I've seen all the stuff online. I've been trying to avoid the spoilers.
No,
but,
you should.
But yeah, in my adolescence, I was like, it was around the time that I started to kind of, have a natural complexion come through. You could see I was more mixed race than I was maybe when I was younger.
Yeah.
And also, the school I went to was predominantly white, and the area, like the school, was a bit more kind of, there was more kids that had a lot more. It was more noticeable, the financial divide.
Okay.
So like trying to, often trying to keep up with the Joneses there, trying to like get the cool trainers that everyone else has got, but you couldn't really afford them. Do you know what I mean? So we had to get fakes, and then they'd obviously be known as fakes from the market, and then you'd get, you know, the mickey taken out of you. But also it was the fact that I also got diagnosed with Crohn's.
How old were
in
you
middle
then,
school.
Stephen?
I was doing tests from age of 12.
Because something was wrong. You were
Yeah.
pain.
Yeah. And I was just a lot smaller than everyone else.
Yeah.
It was like I felt like everybody shot up through puberty, and I stayed stagnant, and we didn't understand what it was. And then, you know, I was in all these tests, and because I was smaller than all the other kids and everyone else was getting bigger, I became the easy target. You know, I was a kid that everyone could push around. And yeah, it was.
I mean, it's almost identikit, isn't it? So you've not got the trainers. You're smaller than everybody else. Got darker skin than most of the kids in class. If you had to make a list of targets.
Oh yeah, and then, you know, to top it all off, you know, I started learning magic tricks, which wasn't the coolest thing at the time. You know, it's not like I kind of set myself up to fail there. I didn't make it easy for myself.
Well, you've done all right.
But yeah, no, I don't know right now. And actually, I look back. I even look back on the bullying, and I'm in some way, in a weird way, slightly thankful that I had to deal with it.
It's a weird one, isn't it? Because sometimes phrases like character forming or whatever we reach for can be camouflage, that there can be ways of pretending that things didn't harm you and didn't hurt you when in fact they did. But you seem to have quite a healthy approach to this. You've spoken about it before, and I don't want to gloss over it. It was proper bullying, and you were beaten up every day, effectively.
Yeah. Especially when we went up to upper school.
You'd fit in bins and things like that.
I got thrown in the bin every single day. We had these two big hills at the school, and they'd take me to the top of them. And
you can say what they were called.
Yeah, well, there were two big hills. We called them the tits, and basically I got taken to the top of them and put in the bin and kicked down the hill every day, as well as other things. You know, like I was still one of the smaller kids, so it was very easy to stick me inside a locker. You know, very easy to like. I mean, these sound like cliched things, but they're just real things that would happen every day at school.
Was there malice? Was there much malice, or had it just become?
Some people it was malice. Yeah, okay. Definitely some people it was malice. There was some of it was just like typical playground. Stuff.
And you're unlucky that you are barely 5 stone. You're smaller than everybody else. But there's a difference, isn't there, between being on the end of what's almost a form of physical banter and being on the end of maliciousness.
There was genuine like malice from people who I mean, I know they ended up getting suspended, these guys, but that would shake me down every day and take the dinner money or the dinner voucher from me, because we were on vouchers for a while. One was on benefits and that, but then we were on the vouchers for a while, and then I'd often get maybe given like £1 to get something from the tuck shop, and then the voucher. And there was at least a couple of weeks where I didn't eat. I'd literally have to get a scallop butty for 14p because my money and my voucher had been taken off me. So I managed to like hold on to 14p, which thankfully there was a chippy called Colinda's, owned by Colin and Linda. See that name there? And my mum was a hairdresser, so she used to do their hair. So they used to always, give me a scallop butty and stuff like that for next to nothing.
I think for people who don't have a background in Yorkshire, I should explain that a scallop is like a large battered slice of potato.
Yeah.
Because it's one of those things like a barm cake or a barm that has different names.
Also, you could up north. I don't know if this is a thing in London or anywhere, but you can get a bag of scraps, which is just like the offcuts of the batter, but it's like crisps almost. They're really nice.
They are really nice. I'm not sure they're very good for you. I don't sense that you'd be going home in tears every night or anything like that. You quite philosophical approach to it all.
Well, I'd probably be in tears as it was happening.
Yes.
But I kind of hid it from everybody.
Yeah.
It got spotted by my grandpa by accident when he came to pick me up one day from school, and he saw it happen after school. He didn't really say anything about it straight away, but as we were walking home, he kind of said, "Listen, I've seen what's going on, and I want to help you. I'll show you some stuff to kind of help you fend it off."
So you think he's going to show me some moves?
Yeah, I thought he was going to be Mr. Miyagi and I'm going to learn karate.
Wax off.
Like either that or I was going to get me to like clean his house and pretend I'm learning something. You know what I mean? But no, he taught me some magic techniques. They're actually They're old, really, really old vaudeville techniques that were famously used by this act. It's a lady called the Georgia Magnet. She was a very she was a small lady, probably similar stature to me when I was younger. But she'd these abilities that she'd developed where she could stand with a row of 20 strong men pushing towards her and they couldn't move her. She made herself like an immovable force, and she did over carny kind of tours, doing over circus events basically as one of the acts. And you can go online and search her. Some of her stuff's amazing, and my grandpa taught me some techniques which I later found out were similar to the type of stuff she was doing, and it's ways of making me immovable, which definitely came in handy. I didn't think it was going to work though. I thought this is going to double the pain.
Yeah.
But when I tried it, it actually stopped them from moving me, and I think they felt it was a bit weird and
freaked them out.
It really freaked them out to the point where they didn't want to be seen to have been stumped by me, so they just spread rumours around playground that I was a weirdo. But it got people off my back, and I survived my school years, and I was able to finish. Well, I say finish my education. I didn't really get very good grades.
It's hardly surprising given everything else that was.
It was a struggle each day to get to learning.
Yeah.
And then
you still wanted to. So that you said something when you were talking about primary school. You said something about that being the child you really were.
Yeah,
and then since then you had to not. You couldn't. They wouldn't let you be the child you really were.
Yeah, I've always been curious, and I love learning because I think it's a luxury.
Yeah.
That I've been around people and places where it's a luxury that not everybody can afford to do. To a high level. I got obsessed with reading and books early on, and because I didn't go out and play that much, I would just get lost in these worlds, in these books, and I'd read things and think one day I want to try that, or maybe I want to go. I'd read about Egypt and think, wow, one day maybe I'd get to Egypt and go do magic there. Still not happened yet, but maybe one day.
Has it not?
No, I haven't been to Egypt yet.
Your grandpa Kenneth, who had been in the Navy.
Yes.
Where did he get his interest in all the vaudeville stuff from? Do you know?
I actually think that it was from being in the Navy, as in I know that obviously because he was in World War II, so but I would assume, obviously I wasn't there. Sure. I would assume.
So you're good, but you're not that good.
Yeah. So I would assume that there was a lot of downtime where the troops would try and keep the morale high with one another by doing silly things, and and because from what my nana said, he didn't go to the war knowing these things, but when he came back, he would entertain people in the bar and stuff like that.
Did anyone, because I know you had a bit of a speech impediment as well, as if we haven't listed.
I still do a little bit. I still can't fully pronounce my R's. I don't know if that sounds like an R or W to everyone else.
It sounds like an R to me.
But and I think, and as a Northerner, as a Yorkshire person, thus are always kind of a bit difficult because we say thanks as opposed to thanks. I have, as an adult, I'd kind of continued some of the speech therapy in order to try and to speak a bit clearer, especially with doing television and stuff like that. But even now, I have to consciously think about it. If I go back to Yorkshire, to Bradford for a couple of days, literally, I come back to London and nobody understands what I'm saying.
Go native.
Yeah, totally.
You won't believe this, but my dad's from Leeds and my mum's from Sheffield.
Oh yeah.
And when I was first living in the Midlands, and I don't think I ever had a Yorkshire accent because Dad was a journalist and we moved around a lot. But I was playing Joseph in the school play, and I used to say "fa" instead of "th." I don't know whether it was because of the background.
I think it's just
But I remember watching the woman playing the innkeeper, the girl playing the innkeeper, Julie, and I couldn't believe how quickly her tongue came in and out of her mouth when she was going, "There isn't any room at the inn," and I'm thinking, I'm never ever going to be able to do that. I'm never going to get the hang of getting my tongue.
I still struggle with it now. I do think it is partly a Yorkshire thing.
Might be. I'd never thought of that before. Did anyone recognise your intelligence? Did anyone say, "This lad's clever"?
Mrs. Wilcox at school and Mr. Smith, they were kind of cool with it. Like Miss Wilcox, she did the English classes,
Yeah.
and she knew that I had a bit of a difficult time, outside of class.
Yes.
So she'd often let me stay behind and look at all the books. Because English class, we had like a library next to the English class, and she'd let me just stay in there rather than go out and play with the kids. I'd just stay in the library and just read. And sometimes, eventually, she'd let me take books home as well, because she wasn't allowed to necessarily take the books at home, but she started to let me take books home. So she definitely saw something in me. She was the first teacher to get me to get up in front of a class and show kids magic for entertainment purposes.
Okay. So you had, I think you've said this, I'm not claiming that I've got some massive insight, but you had almost a sense of frustrated creativity that you couldn't get out of yourself through traditional, so you wouldn't get it from trying to write a poem or a story, but you still had a sense that you wanted to do something creative.
Yeah, I don't even think I was frustrated, because I don't think I realised myself.
No, fair enough.
I think it was more a sense of I hadn't found my voice.
Yeah.
I was always down for trying stuff. I tried for the football team, I tried BMXing, skateboarding. Believe it or not, I played for the school rugby team. I definitely wasn't built for sport like that.
What position?
I was a winger. I
On the outside, so you're quite nippy.
I was fast.
Fair
so
enough.
I was used to running away from people. So yeah. I played. I only played for the rugby team because at the time my mum's partner, he wasn't the nicest person to me, and he'd always call me a sissy girl, and he'd say, because I wasn't necessarily I didn't feel like I was built for sport per se, so I didn't really play them much, and he always would say that you need to kind of get involved in sport. So to appease him, I joined the rugby team, which was a big mistake. And the thing is, Bradford was at the time a big rugby team, a big rugby town. Bradford Bulls were the big team.
Yeah.
Some of my friends, played like Leon Price, and so that, went on to become like rugby legends. So it's not like a weird sport for me to pick in Bradford, but it was a weird sport for me to pick due to my stature and due to everything else going on.
So you had friends. I mean, even though you were getting battered every break time or rolled down a hill in a bin, but you had, because you mentioned a couple of people now. You've mentioned Johnny Fairley, you've mentioned Leon
Johnny didn't
Price.
go to my school.
Oh, okay.
He went to a nicer school.
Oh, okay.
He went to like a school, like it was in Cleckheaton, his school, which is a little while away from where.
But you weren't lonely, is what I'm driving at, or were you?
I became very comfortable being on my own.
Okay, that's different, isn't it?
Yeah, I had a sort of small circle of people, like because Johnny went to a different school. Often, I would see him after school, right? Or I'd just hang out in his garden until he got home from his school because my school was literally next door to his house, so I could go and just chill in his garden. He had a trampoline in the garden, so didn't have that on the estate where I was. So I'd go and I'd rather go there than go back home. Okay. To the point where his mum and dad gave me a spare key to the house, so I could just go wherever I want. I've still got a spare bedroom there.
Wow.
And then at school, I had a few. They were friends. But they were friends by default.
Okay.
Because everybody from Delphill Estate, although when you're on the estate it's every man for himself, when you're outside the estate, they kind of look after each other.
Sure.
So like Wayne Jowett, who lived about 4 doors down from me, he was like a friend, and we'd sometimes walk to school together.
Right.
And he was a tougher lad, and he always kind of would, he wouldn't necessarily go out of his way to fight for me, but if someone was giving me a hard time, he'd say, "Yo, that's enough now." Yeah. If he saw it, he was very measured.
Okay.
He actually, he saw me get thrown into the dam. Before Delphill Estate is separated from Woodside Estate by a dam, and the dam was where all the cool kids would go and hang out. And one day I got invited down there. I thought I was becoming one of the cool kids, but it was all a trick to get me there so they could throw me in the dam because they knew that I didn't know how to swim.
Oh, right.
But Wayne Jowett jumped in the water and got me out. So he is like, he's someone he's always going to be a solid friend in some respects, but it wasn't like a friend out of choice. It was a friend by default.
I understand.
But I still kind of see him nowadays. Not as much as I see Johnny, but
Sure.
if I'm doing shows, he'll often still come along, and we keep in touch when we can. But then there was friends that I didn't realise were friends till years later. So I remember I told you about the guys who were shaking me down.
Yeah.
So they got suspended from school. Now, I never knew, how that came about. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I got brought into the office one day by Mr. Smith, and he said, "What's we've heard what's going on. You don't have to say anything about yourself, but we're going to take the guys aside and we're going to suspend them for a week. And it needs to stop happening. We're going to make sure you get your dinner each day." And then the guys who were shaking me down, they assumed it was somebody else who had said something, and I didn't know. So so years later, I was going through my social media. I got a new social media, by the way. Dynamo is dead, if anybody wants to follow me.
There we go.
So I was going through my social media, and I got a message from a girl called Rachel, and it's mad because growing up, Rachel was one of the cool girls at school.
Right.
She was, she's very pretty.
Yeah.
And it's almost like I would feel like invisible to someone like Rachel.
Yeah.
The only reason I knew that she knew me briefly is because our houses were in a similar area. So when I moved from Delford Estate to a different estate later on, an area called Markfield, which is a little bit nicer. This was the first time my family had bought a house.
Because your mum has set herself up as a hairdresser now.
Yeah, set up as a hairdresser, and she'd remarried and
Right.
everything. So and then we had like a more stable household.
Yeah.
And so we'd bought a house, moved to a slightly nicer area, and then this girl Rachel lived on this street. But I was definitely not cool enough to talk to her. Do you know what I mean? Like she was definitely one of the cool girls. And so years later, I'm scrolling through social media, and she messaged me saying, "Oh, I'm so glad you did so well." And then she, we were chatting on the DMs, and she was basically saying, "Oh yeah, all those years ago, it was me who told the teachers."
Wow.
I saw it happening. I didn't even know that. I didn't even remember her being in my class.
Right.
Because I was like so just concerned about not getting beat up, but I just didn't even notice her. So to think that someone like her, one of the coolest people in school,
was looking out
looked out for me. She was like a guardian angel, really. So yeah, shout outs to Rachel.
Yes, I'd second that. Well done, Rachel. It sounds a bit too good to be true, doesn't it? In the narrative arc of your life, but not long after teaching you how to. Has it got a name? Has it got a name?
It's just. I guess it's just. I'm sticking to the ground.
Yeah. So I think they teach Extinction Rebellion protesters how to do something like that as well, so that the police find it.
Yeah. Like it's all grounded in like in old techniques.
Yes.
So yeah.
And not long after that, your grandpa gives you a deck of cards.
Yeah. Well.
And in the film of your life, this is where the music starts playing.
Yeah. No, it's really funny because just before I walked into this room, I've been editing a video for my new show. I'm doing a 47 live shows at Underbelly Boulevard in Soho, and I've got some of the storytelling moments in it I want to be told through video. So I've just finished making a video which is the origin story of the Dynamo Shuffle, which I do. The opening bit is like, once I found, once my grandpa introduced us to magic and I put a pack of cards in my hand, it changed everything.
Yeah.
But it wasn't until I did this, and this that my style was born, and the Dynamo Shuffle showing you the power in our hands. So like we literally before I came in this room, we'd just finished making that video. But yeah, like it wasn't like he just put cards in my hands and I could just do it. There was always cards around because he would show people his magic with cards. But the cards were really they felt huge because I had little hands. I was a kid, right? Yeah. But then eventually he got me a bridge-sized deck of cards, which I don't know if you know. There's poker size, which is the common size that everyone's got. That are actually quite hard to manipulate because they're a bit bigger. And then there's bridge size, which are made for playing the game of bridge, which are a lot smaller. They're more kid-friendly size cards. And you got me a kid-size pack, and suddenly, that changed everything. I realised
immediately. Did you?
Once it taught me a few things.
Yeah.
And then I started to pick up the shuffling techniques and the skills quite naturally.
Well, this is the point, isn't it? And no modesty is allowed here, because you could give a pack of cards to anybody. Your grandpa and others must have realised pretty quickly that you were a bit like learning a language in 2 days, that you'd picked up this language incredibly quickly.
Yeah, I guess it's a bit like giving David Beckham a football.
Yeah.
You know, but you can give a lot of kids a football, but not all going to be able to kick it like Beckham. You know, and I think I'd tried many things in my life, and I never really quite found one that I was that good at. You know, but
you're still very young. I mean, a lot of people perhaps never find the thing that they're brilliant at, but you had a sense of wanting to, I think.
Yeah, I just feel like I was trying to find a sense of belonging.
Okay.
Because I felt, although I was comfortable in my own skin in some respects, and I didn't need, I'd got used to not having people around, so I was happy with the small family and the small group of friends I had around me, and I'd love to get lost in books. If anything, more people being around would have mean less time to read books.
Yeah.
So I fell in love with the habit of learning and studying in my own time, because I didn't feel like I could maximise it when I was supposed to be learning and studying in school time. So I was 24/7 school in some respects.
Yeah.
But yeah, like once I started messing with the cards, it's almost like I surpassed my grandpa's levels in like the first week.
Right. Yeah. Okay.
To the point where he couldn't really show me anymore with cards. But then him and my nana, they nurtured it. Like, they would take me, we'd get on 3 buses to go to a place called Merlin's in Wakefield. And it was like a magic shop and like joke shop and so on. And basically in the back they had VHS tapes. They're a bit like streaming, but you put it into a little box underneath your telly. Right, for anyone listening who don't know what a VHS tape is.
Oh, don't joke.
So they had VHS tapes of like magic tutorials, and like there was this set called the Encyclopedia of Card Sleights by this magician called Darryl. Darryl ends up becoming one of my favourite magicians of all time. He's not alive anymore, sadly, but he was known as the magician's magician, and he invented some of the greatest card sleights that the world's ever seen. Some of them I still do to this day. And I remember to buy one of the tapes, they weren't cheap. They were like £15-20 a tape.
Sure, yeah.
So I was doing a paper round at the time. I'd get £5 a week for the paper round. So once a month we'd go to the shop and I'd end up buying one of them. But then at Christmas, for a surprise, my nana and gramps got me I had 3 of the tapes already. They got me the other 5 because there was 8 in the set.
Wow.
And they became like my Bible. Like I studied those tapes religiously, and yeah, it literally changed my life. And then it's weird because I found out that Darryl, because he was from America, right? But I found out he was coming to Bradford, of all places, to do a lecture on his skills.
Yeah.
And I tried to get tickets, but turns out it was for over 18s, and I was only like 13 or something at the time. So then I was having Sunday roast at the White Lion pub, and I got a tap on the shoulder and turned around, and it was Darryl, and my nana had secretly arranged for me to have dinner with Darryl. And I remember like he gave me like a masterclass over dinner, and literally some of the stuff he taught me to this day, it's still like a staple in my performing repertoire.
And did you impress him? Did you show him some of your moves?
I'd like to think I did.
Yeah.
I think there was definitely, I think I killed him with enthusiasm. That's what I'll say. I don't think I was very good, but I just, he could see, I think maybe he saw the passion that he had for it in me, and yeah, that was a big turning point, because suddenly not only had I had like a masterclass from a true master, but I got to understand just in that space of 2-hour like dinner what it takes to get to that level.
Right.
And I became obsessed with trying to attain it.
It's the first time you've connected beyond Bradford because he's
Mhm.
American. He's from the other side of the world. He's from the telly. He's from
Yep.
the screen, and he's sitting next to you. And so you begin perhaps somewhere deep inside to start thinking about the day when you might take it
Yeah,
way,
like
way beyond Bradford.
yeah, like years later.
Yeah.
He got me an invite to the Las Vegas Magic Invitational, and it was a secret society of magicians all brought into this hotel called the San Reno Hotel in Las Vegas. It was my first ever performance in Vegas ever.
Gosh.
I was only, I think I must have been, I was 17 at the time, so I wasn't even old enough to like go to any of the actual, the casino bits. So I was just in my hotel room at the restaurants and in the auditorium, right? And I've got photos of me performing there, me in my little hoodie, performing to all these magicians, and Daryl's there, and he's just grinning. He's just got he's just grinning like a Cheshire cat. Whilst he's standing up. Actually, I'd had him pick one of the cards for the trick I was doing. So like, yeah, it was. I connected with somebody, but then we stayed in contact. You know what I mean? And it was almost like we were long distance pen pals for many years, and then the world evolved, and suddenly you get to a place where you can speak to people online nowadays, and
of course.
you've got
So he's like Obi-Wan Kenobi to your Skywalker.
Definitely. There was him. There was through him I got to meet people like Gregory Wilson, who I literally spoke to him 2 days ago. There's I didn't really have my father around, but I look back and there's so many forefathers that were the role models that, like, I didn't have one father, but I've had probably 50, 60 fathers in my lifetime who've come into my life and imparted bits of wisdom, bits of knowledge that have helped me create the sensibilities of who I am today. Like, Emil from Explosion, from the youth club Mapper, was the person who introduced me to Tony from the Prince's Trust. And that, without that happening, I would never have got my business started. I would never have created Dynamo Modern Magic, my first ever company. And
I get it. There's so many different strands that all come together in the right space. And I think in the new show, which kicks off on the 28th of March at the Underbelly Soho, you are telling some of your story as well as doing.
In some ways, I'm telling more of my personal story than I maybe ever have, because this is the first Stephen Frayne show.
Yes.
Like, I actually start the show with a little video of little young Stephen Frayne. I am talking about myself in third person now, a bit weird, but anyway, I started the video with a young me introducing myself. It's so cringy, but also it's kind of people
lovely.
Like it.
And
that was when I was first auditioning to be part of the Bradford Magic Circus. I had to make an audition tape, so I had to borrow my granddad's camera and get him to film it. And I literally, I'm wearing like the most cringy top. I've got a polo shirt, right? Probably like a little cheap one, like just from the market, right? Yeah. And on the pocket here, so where this badge is on this top I'm wearing right now, I'd got my nana to basically. She used to do knitting and stuff, so she'd made, I don't know what it's called, knitting. It's like, where you have that circle disc and you put your things for it and you make imagery.
Like embroidery
type thing, yeah. So she'd embroidered an ace of spades, and then we'd literally stitched it onto the pocket, and it was so heavy it made the pocket weigh down. But I wanted to look perfect for the Magic Circle audition, so. Yeah, that we actually start the show with a little bit of that. There's a lot of candid stuff in this, because I think, I'm at a place in my life where I got really sick a few years ago, where as Stephen, I was struggling to do anything, I was struggling to live, right, because of my illness. And it felt like such an oxymoron that as Dynamo, I'd go out there and do all these incredible things and like be otherworldly.
Walk on water.
Yeah, and so I had to like just take a step back and just focus on getting Stephen better, in order to be able to kind of be able to share magic again. And in the midst of all that, I think. With all the medication that I was on in hospital, because at one point I was on 28 tablets a day, plus infusions, and although that was definitely helping me survive, it definitely was making me a bit loopy because
Sure.
of the side effects from all the medication. And,
Right.
you know, like I was on some heavy prescription
Yeah.
medication to keep me alive. So I just think I couldn't be a character anymore. You know, I had to like just say, all right, I've got flaws, I'm human. If I'm going to go back into the world, people have to I've just got to be me.
Yeah.
And hopefully, you know, the magic I've got as Stephen is good enough. And this show is the first show ever. Obviously, some of the best parts of my magic came from my Dynamo era, and them bits are gonna, you know, always gonna be there.
Yes, of course.
But I just feel like I've matured enough to be able to let people in.
And to be the child that you always were.
Yeah.
When you mentioned about primary school, you stopped being that child when you got to middle school.
Yeah. I went to survival mode.
Yeah.
But yeah, like I think I've realised my best chance of survival is being me.
Or the authentic you.
Yeah.
It's a therapy thing, isn't it?
Yeah, because you put it all out there,
the
then
authentic self.
If you put
What's the
everything out
worst
there,
you
what can they do? Do you know what I mean?
They can't.
If they don't like me, well, that's their problem.
That's a them problem, not a you problem. We've reached the point in your life when you began to get known. So it happened very quickly. And you began to get known as Dynamo. And so my next question would have been, why did you decide you didn't? You've already answered that question. But you must have enjoyed the early success on many levels.
I mean,
it's beyond your wildest dream stuff, isn't it? Really,
to be
the speed and the scale of your success.
Be a kid from Bradford, from a council estate, to go from getting the Prince's Trust support, from performing on council estates to royal estates. Like literally, I literally went to the toilet at the palace. Do you know what I mean? I've got Crohn's as well. You know, like I'm always, so that's going. Toilets are quite a sacred place for me. You know, I spend a lot of time there reading. Yeah. I think that's also why reading became a big thing, because I literally, if you actually come to my house or my magic studio, like my toilets are like libraries.
Right.
They're just books everywhere.
Yes.
Because I come up with a lot of best ideas, to be honest. There, but I think because I've got Crohn's, I've got to make the most of it.
Of course.
You know what I mean? But yeah, like I've literally, my curiosity, I kind of almost, it had been spent years being almost unfulfilled. And then in the short space of a few years, it went from 0 to 100. And I was, when I first came to London, I was just excited at the prospect of, this is where Dizzy Rascal's from. You know what I mean? Like he was like my music hero at the time. And then within the space of a year, not only had I met him, but I'd also filmed with him for my first ever TV show. And we became friends. Do you know what I mean? So, to then go back to Bradford and see my friends back there and tell them all these stories, go back to Bradford with mixtapes that I'd bought off guys selling me mixtapes out of their backpacks on Oxford Street. There was a shop called Dark and Cold and Deal Wheel Records where all the London rappers, who a lot of them are like famous now, your Skeptors, your Storms, it's like people used to frequent these music shops, and then outside of them they'd be freestyling, almost like a scene out of 8 Mile, right?
Yeah.
And then they'd sell you their mixtapes out of the bags, and that inspired me to make that. The money I got from the Prince's Trust, the way I got the money out of the Prince's Trust was I told them my plan.
Right.
And my plan was I wanted to make a magic mixtape. So I wanted to have my own like DVD, because this was at the time when it was 2003, so DVDs had just become a big thing.
Yeah.
And DVDs are also a bit like streaming, for anyone who doesn't know. If you go back in time, there was like different levels of streaming, right? But yeah, there was these DVDs, and with the Prince's Trust money, I bought a laptop and a camcorder so I could start filming, and the camcorder I bought and the laptop I bought were DVD writable ones, so I made all these DVDs myself, and would put them in my backpacks, come to London, do magic in Covent Garden, do magic outside the music shops, and then sell my DVDs out of the backpacks. And
they saw a business plan there. They saw, this will work. That's why they gave you the money.
Yeah, and we know the first DVD we ever made sold at 8,000 copies.
It's
and this was before social media.
Yeah, God, yes,
so,
of course. So it really is just word of mouth.
Yeah, and then that ended up getting me, like I'd done a few spots. Like my first ever TV spot was a show called Terry and Gabby. But then my big spot came after that DVD. My big spot came on Richard and Judy.
Yeah.
And then that got seen by Channel 4, and then Channel 4 and MTV. I did an MTV series, and I also did a Channel 4 show called Dynamo's Estate of Mind.
Yes.
Which was inspired by another rapper that I'd met outside the record stores called Skinny Man, who was a legendary British MC, and he had an album called Council Estate of Mind, and I became friends with him, and he kind of let me use the name Estate of Mind for my first show. And
so you're living your dreams.
Yeah, I was living my dreams, and then I was flying high. I got to the point though where I don't think I've never been like a show kid. I'd never really wanted to go to, like, you know, going on stage is something that it's an effort for me to do, because I'm not a natural performer in that sense.
You're quite introverted.
Definitely. Like I much prefer the pursuit and the learning than the performing aspect of it. But when I start performing, something takes over me and I become alive, you know. But it's a conscious
But you've got to
effort.
get there. You've got to climb that ladder.
Yeah. I'm always very nervous before I go on stage.
Right.
And I think there's definite level of imposter syndrome that was built up over the years of
Really?
having.
Even though you.
Yeah.
Because I like the David Beckham parallel. You don't get imposter syndrome if you're scoring free kicks from 40 yards away.
Yeah, but I think there's expectation.
Okay. Yeah.
You know,
so you're worried that you're going to let people down.
Because I had so much success so quick, and I had all these TV shows. I'm doing all these incredible things, and you know, I got to a point where I wouldn't leave the house because I was scared if I leave the house, people are going to stop me and say, "Can you do some magic?" And if I'm not as good as they see me do on TV, then it all falls apart. And you know, it was like that happened, and then I'd do these like I'd go through phases where I'd go on tour, you know, I did like O2 Arena and stuff like that. But then my Crohn's every few years tends to come and remind me that I've still got it.
You're mortal.
And then, you know, I ended up in hospital for a while and kind of have to almost, it's like I keep having to have a reset.
Well, there's two obvious resets, I think, isn't it? I mean, two prolonged, as far as I know, there may have been more prolonged periods of hospitalisation. The first one, you thought, I'm going to do this for my life. I am going to make a career out of magic. And then the second one, more recently, you thought, I'm going to kill Dynamo and I'm going to be Stephen.
So before we go on to
the
killing Dynamo part, we'll go back a little bit. But this actually leads us to the exact moment after I killed Dynamo, right? So early on, when I look back now, in hindsight, I realise that every ounce of creativity that I've ever put out into the world through any of my work has always come from a dark place. Like, I've always been running away from something and channeling the negative times in my life into something positive. You know, early on it was abuse from my mum's partners, you know, and then it was and abuse at school from other school kids, you know. It was not being taken seriously as I was becoming a young adult, just because of the area I lived in. So I couldn't get jobs in the places I wanted. I couldn't excel in the basics of life. So like, I was always trying to either break stereotypes or running away from something and trying to just throw myself into something else to make me forget about it. Yeah. But also to try and, you know, like, make something of myself just to prove everybody wrong.
And to distract people from hurting you. Yeah,
totally. So then, when I was at my lowest in hospital a few years ago, it was highly publicised by the news. The paparazzi got loads of amazing pictures of me looking amazing on all this medication, totally dishevelled. My parents had changed. I was not in a good way, and I spent 18 months trialling medications, trying to find something. Touch wood, I'm on an amazing medication now that the NHS found me, and I've gone from being on 28 tablets a day to now I'm on just 2 tablets a day, which for anybody who goes through what I'm going through knows that that's a big deal to kind of get to be able to survive on so little. But like that period, you know, I was so low, I was suicidal. In the midst of this, my grandpa passed in 2012, but my nana passed. This was 2021, and when she passed away, the same weekend she passed, my 2 dogs also died, and it was like I'd started to get my strength back, but then suddenly I just lost some of the sources of strength in my life, and I was like, man, like, you know what? My nana always called me Stephen. My dogs, they know that I'm just dad to my dogs. So like, I think my nana's not around anymore. My grandpa's gone. I think I need to keep the magic of their legacy alive, and I've got to do it, you know, in the way that they knew me. And I think that played a big part in me making the decision that, okay, Dynamo needs to be laid to rest with my nana and my dogs. You know, it's not the end of everything, but like, you know, I realised when my nana died and my dogs died that although they're gone, their legacy of what they did in their lifetime still happened, still existed, and I could celebrate that just by thinking about it every single day. And I thought, well, although I'm going to lay Dynamo to rest, what I achieved as my alter ego still happened, still existed. I can still, you know, take
still
credit
yours.
for it. But I just felt like it was definitely a time to move on, and I think the only way, you know, being me, I picked the only way to do that is not only to just, you know, metaphorically bury my past. I literally buried myself alive at the foot of the Angel of the North. And spoiler alert, you can still watch the show Dynamo is Dead on Sky on demand, but I did survive, so the ending is going to be a bit of a spoiler for you, but it's an amazing show, features some incredible people.
It's an insane show, isn't it?
And then then after, so going full circle, when you were saying about, like, you know, about getting to Dynamo is Dead, so about 3 minutes after I'd got out of the hole and I'm in my Winnebago next to the burial site, my friend Pete came in and he's like, you did it, mate, you smashed it, how's it feel? And I'm like, yeah, no, it feels good. Like, it felt weird, but it feels good, because, you know, you spent months and months and months training for something, and then it's all led up to like what ultimately was 2 minutes or whatever, you know, it was a super quick time. And he goes, what are you going to do now? And I goes, I don't know, because I realised I'd left everything in the ground. Like, I'd left all the bad stuff in the ground, and I was like, I'm not sure what to do, because I'm happy. Like, I don't have a worry in the world, but I've never created from a place of happiness before. So I was a little bit lost for a while, and it took me a while. You know, it took me a while to kind of figure out my purpose again, but I found it, and I realised, and it partly was working towards this whilst I was making Dynamo is Dead, because I was highlighting the magic in other people as I went through the journey of the show, and speaking to people who've been through similar circumstances and talk about how they'd overcome it. And it was, you know, it was like people like, you know, Coldplay, you know, Demi Lovato, you know, Raphael Rowe, like, phenomenal story, like, he'd been in prison for a crime he didn't commit and served like 18 years, you know, and somehow he managed to find the magic in himself to not lose himself completely and get out, and now he's an incredible, you know, he has incredible TV shows and he's helping inspire other people. Like, so I realised that there was a magic in other people, and I think I realised that from being in hospital, like the way that NHS rallied around and got me back on my feet, that's a different type of magic that I never realised. I think I'd spent so much time focused on the magic that I do for so many years that I'd missed out on the magic of everybody else that's all around me. And now I'm kind of in that era of my life, and I made a show called Miracles, which came out at Christmas. You can watch that on Sky as well.
No DVD for younger listeners.
You can actually watch it on demand on Sky TV or Now TV as well. And but it's it's that show. The Dynamo's Dead had a lot of like famous faces in it.
Yes.
But Miracles was about, you know, finding the miracles in the everyday, and we filmed with like a guy called Alan, who set up the Brentford Penguins Football Club, which is a football club for Down syndrome children. You know, we filmed with a guy called Ashley at the Upper Rooms, which is a soup kitchen. He went there initially as a service user. He was homeless and needed food, and now he runs the food department there. You know, we filmed with a young guy called Travis from my hometown of Bradford, who, when he was 9 years old, had a conversation with a homeless man, and then went to his dad and said, "I'm going to go home and sell all my toys, and let's set up a food bank." And that food bank helps 200 people a month. You know, so like I got to showcase and highlight real magic that's happening in the world all around us, and I was able to just share a little bit of mine along the way. But yeah, I think now I realised that magic is in the ability to make somebody believe in something, and if that is the case, then the ultimate magic you could do is magic that helps people believe in themselves. So that's where my head's at right now. But yeah, if you like, Miracles was the first TV show I've made where I was genuinely like from a happy place.
So the creativity was coming from a positive place, a happy place, and it shows.
Yeah, and
you seem lighter on that screen,
and it's exciting. Like I don't do it for this stuff. Like this is a total surprise to me. But you know, I've been nominated for a Royal Television Society Award for Best Entertainment Performance for Miracles, which is, and it's not the show that's been nominated. It's Stephen Frayne, but like it's on the nomination it says Stephen Frayne. So like it's my first ever TV show, Stephen Frayne, and I've been nominated for an award. So I'm up against Claudia Winkleman and Anne and Dex, so they're legends. So I'm not gonna beat them, but just to be named amongst those names is phenomenal.
Baby steps.
Yeah.
You know, one step at a time. I don't know if you've already answered this. It's probably my last question. And I don't know what you did previously when it came to I want my own show, I want my own residency, I want to do the O2, I want to play the Manchester Arena. Do you have ambitions in the sense of things that you still want to tick off? I mean, again, the big 47 show residency coming up at the Underbelly Boulevard Soho is on one level it's a massive deal because it's Stephen Frayne doing it, not Dynamo. But on another level, you've played much bigger venues than that before. You've done much bigger things.
I mean, I definitely have ambitions, but I never pre-plan what they are. I'm very impulsive. I like, as my health has got better, I've learnt to work within my limits, and I've, rather than overwork myself, I say this about to do 47 shows in a row, but rather than overcommit to too many things, I'm kind of more picking passion projects that I want to put my all into. And it's always been a passion project to me to have like a residency in London, like doing the big arenas and stuff like that. It's an amazing feeling, but it also scares me so much.
Right.
I feel intimidated by it even to this day. I know I get up there and I'll do it, right? Whereas I actually went to see a show at the venue Underbelly Boulevard that I'm performing in, and it was the first time I'd ever been in a venue where I'm like, I want to do a show here. Because I don't normally go to venues and want to do shows. Right. I'm very happy to sit in the background and just, I'm comfortable knowing that I've got the ability to take over the room with some magic in a second, but I'm always like, you have to push me to get me to do it.
Got it.
Right?
Yeah.
But I was like, I love this venue. Like, it's perfect for magic. It's big but small at the same time. It's 220 people per show, but I like the fact I can see everybody's faces. I can be in the crowd doing magic with people. I can do magic that 220 people can be involved in at the same time. So it's more of an immersive experience, and I love the fact that I'm creating my own world that people can come into for a long time. Like I purposely chose to only do it in London for the time being, because it's my first long run since getting better. So I want to at least just doing it in London right now. I can go home each night. I can go to my specialist and my doctors if I need to in between stuff, and I can, it's almost like a big test, because I'm touch wood going to get through all these shows swimmingly.
Yes.
And then, you know, my next ambition is to be able to take the show on the road, you know, to be able to take it to all the places. You know, it's a show that, you know, every city you go to, you're going to find a venue that's like 200, 300 seats.
Of course.
So it's a show that can literally go anywhere, you know. Like my big arena shows, it was very specific where I could take them, you know, and it was like a 14 trucks to take the stage around, you know, 14 articulated lorries, you know. It was a massive 30-person team.
Yeah.
You know, like I wanted to create a show that I could put in the back of my car and travel the world, you know, like just basically put it in a flight case and, you know,
you could
do magic everywhere.
You could do it in your grandpa's sitting room.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. And it's another full circle moment, because when I first moved to London, so I used to come to London when I was 15, right, and do busking in Covent Garden. But I officially moved here when I was 19. Technically, I've lived in London longer than I lived in Bradford now, because I'm 42 now, right? But when I was performing in Covent Garden, I ended up doing magic for this guy called Sean. And turns out he was a manager of a nightclub called Too Much, which is now called The Box in Soho.
Yeah.
And he gave me my first residency at The Box. Well, it was called Too Much at the time. And now my first residency as Stephen Frayne at the Underbelly Boulevard is literally in the building next door to where it all started, where I did my first ever residency. It's actually owned by the same people who own the building own the same building that I'm doing my shows in. So it is like a full circle moment, you know, to be able to like go back and do my residency in some ways where it all started.
Have you ever been happier?
I don't think so. I think obviously, you know, my shows are coming up literally my first show is this week. I've got a lot of things I need to do to get it ready, so there's a little bit of nervous and apprehension there, but at the same time I know what I'm about to share with people is amazing. So yeah, I'm the happiest I've ever been, and I think come speak to me after 47 shows, I'll probably be the happiest person you've ever met in your life.
You deserve it. Up Close and Magical, by the time you hear this, will be pretty much up and running at the Underbelly Boulevard in Soho for, as we may have mentioned, just the 48 nights.
Yeah.
Stephen Frayne, thank you.
Thank you very much.